Thank you so much for having me. So today I will be explaining about the search for fashion, my experience in fashion. What you see here is a picture from my grandparents, Isabel and Gabriel Montes. What I found really inspiring about them is that they were coming from a really inventive generation. For example, my grandmother, she made actually the wedding dress that you saw just now frequently in the first picture. And my grandfather used to work as a fisherman, working a lot in the fields with filaments. So my graduation project was an ode to my great grandmother, and she was a craftsperson herself. She used to make the sheets from my family. She did a lot of macrame. So it was really interesting for me as a designer to have that kind of new interpretation of creating my own materials in my fashion collection. And what you see here is a picture of my first capsule collection after graduating. I think this is an interesting image because it was a mistake from my part. Uh, it was too fast because after graduating, you are searching for new ways, new roads. And in my case, I was trying to sell to earn money because you need to go on and to get like an audience, but I did not have a clue. So I went to the Première Vision. I bought some textiles and I made my collection. I hang it in concept stores. And I was feeling that I wanted to experiment. I did not know enough about materials. So in that way, I was able to get sponsorships from Philips. I created fiberglass materials, maritime materials from the ship world, from the boat world. And afterwards, I had some platforms like Amsterdam Fashion Week that I could use as performances to create like the image of the imaginary world that I have in my mind as a performance. And after that, I had the opportunity 1 year later to go more research and development. The road in Textiel Lab Tilburg, where I was able to work with technicians and really inspiring people. And I had the idea to create like a new material, a material that creates a synergy around the body with layers melting through each other. And I simply asked them, what kind of materials do you have in your material library? Because I want to make a 3D material that really starts to grow around the body. And I was able to work with soluble yarns, as you see here. I had the luck to work with amazing teams around me that created a few events where I was able to do catwalk shows. And this also allowed me to stay relative, to create momentums for myself as a designer, to see how light, for example, and movement works around the female body. And it was really in a playful way. And I wanted to let go the idea that I wanted to sell the actual fashion garment, but really investigate and research how material actually works around the body and how I can also make textile collections and adaptations to ready-to-wear pieces and haute couture pieces. And in this specific collection, it was really interesting for me to experiment a lot. When I was little, I used to love to be in the house of my great grandmother in Spain, and she had like a lot of iconic Madonna figurines, and it was really interesting for me to have these elements also in my fashion shows. So water became like a prominent element in my work, and also the direct connection with, for example, an iconic image with a model that has an orb in her hands. The orb is symbolic for creation, and in this specific show during Fashion Week, it's all about creating the momentum, right? So everything can go wrong or everything can go right. You just need to let go control and see what happens on the stage. And working in the textile lab and creating my own materials also has its limitations because, for example, a jacquard weaving machine has a weft and a warp. And with the warp, it's really limited because mostly the warp is a monofilament or a cotton, for example. And in this specific collection, the Textile Lab told me, we need to do a research and development project with you, Jeff, for many years. And we need to work right now with what we have. So this is the second study, actually, that you see. It was an experiment with models where I was able to change the warp from the jacquard weaving machine from white to black. So in my first collection, where you saw the iconic Madonna model pouring the indigo ink on her fiberglass, this was a direct connection with color. So in this collection, it was really inspiring to have a textile that had like a silver outer line. And then when the water hits the textile, all the creation starts to go on, and you see the black color going on, and it almost looks like it's melted, and it looked like it was almost set on fire. And this was really like an illusion that I was feeling really interested in at that moment. And then again, this presentation was an experiment in between. I did have not any idea what was going to happen, and it was also really refreshing to work with models that were open-minded to do this this experiment with, almost as you can say, in an Yves Klein way, in an artistic way. And I love the model that was pregnant because she was symbolizing for the creation. In an iconic way, she was holding her pregnant belly in a very powerful way, and it was about female empowerment, and I loved working with these models. So afterwards, doing that experiment, it was a preview for my debut in Paris Fashion Week. And here you can see an overview of the collection that I created in 2013. I don't know if you remember, but I told that this collection was a mistake. And it took me 4 years later to create the collection that I was dreaming about, with the haute couture pieces, with the elements that transform directly around the stage. So it's really a balance about everything that I have as a designer, what I can show and do, because it's about also potential ready-to-wear garments and also really unique pieces. And at the same time, it's also a textile exploratory way to see if I can sell clothes and textiles and really understand also how a textile can form around the body. So this was the final stage where the Textile Lab finally was able to change the white to the black cotton to the monofilament. And the interesting thing here was that I used the soluble yarn to create shape. So monofilament is a very architectural material, and it tends to have a synergy with soluble yarn. But then in the end, soluble yarn melts away. So in the search for that creation about the momentum that was created by the mist in the installation was a simulation. It was a moment, and it was my first show in Paris. It was a really interesting moment for me because yeah, I mean, I've always dreamt about doing a show in Paris, and you want to do it right. And I had 80 people working for me for this specific event. And I was so thankful to everybody that helped me to go to this moment. And the final outcome was actually everything that I dreamed about. And I still look back at that presentation as something very close to my heart. And it was also the start for my nomination during Villa Noailles HRS Festival. It was the 33rd edition. It was the perfect moment for me to show what I can do with material and also think about my road in the future. Because at this point, it's interesting to join platforms and to collaborate, but then the world after is also really a question mark. So where I started after graduating, the search, it was still not there. And at first I had the idea, that when I was showing in Paris, it would be my moment. And after that, maybe I would go and sell. But this did not happen for me. Actually, I had still a big question mark because I felt I did not know enough about material. And also, my expertise in weaving, in jacquard weaving, was very profound with Textile Lab. But still, I had the idea of creating my own yarns and my own filaments. But how do you do that? And also, I had the limitations in Textile Lab. They had the soluble yarn, but then at the same time in Paris, I had people asking me, do you want to sell soluble clothes, like clothes that melt away? And it's really important as a designer to explain your vision, because maybe in the beginning, sometimes people are curious and they ask a lot of questions. And then when you explain your vision, it unfolds by itself. So using soluble yarn and creating and studying these signature pieces really give me the insight to also present these ideas that I have for the future. For example, the adaptive archifilament. It's actually a filament that creates a shape. And I did not have the resources. So I went to Textile Lab and I used soluble yarns to simulate my vision, my dream to investors. So the collection that I was dreaming about was still not finished, but I was kind of hitting and touching the marks that I was searching for. And also what was really interesting during Villa Noailles in France is that I was really connected with my roots. And the creative director that was doing the show, she told me, no, the music is not good. It needs to be more deep, more open. And I was so confused because I did not understand what she was talking about. And then my project that I'm working on currently right now, Project Marinero, was a song that my grandfather used to sing to me, a sailorman song. And it was such an emotional moment for me because I decided to go back to my studio. You can see here, it's a former nature and chemistry laboratory, CHEMA in Arnhem. We share it with 80 artists. And this is also a really interesting interdisciplinary space where you can collaborate. And I went back to my studio, and it's inside a very forest area. And I decided to go really small again and to think, what do I want in the future and what do I really want to sell? So I looked at the nature around me and the silence, and I collected a lot of pine cones and I studied them. And I also studied biomimicry, and it really hit me because biomimicry, it was actually what I was doing in Textile Lab, working with flat surfaces and researching how they can become 3D, right? So the soluble yarn simulated how I can go through 3D, but then it doesn't really form into a garment. It just breaks down and creates an interesting art piece. So creating my own yarn was the next question. And then biomimicry also inspired me to work with no waste, because all the elements in the nature, they are rectangular and, for example, in circles, very elemental shapes. So I started folding and cutting paper and hitting them with a book, and you start to see all these folding lines. So this was really interesting to think also how I can put all this biomimicry into the textile blueprints that I was making in Textile Lab. I did a pitch. I went to the Ter Textielmesse because I wanted to create my own yarns. And I had the idea, like, I want to buy new yarns. And I went to the trade fair. I did networking, and I was able to get in contact with ITEX, the Textile Lab, the Textile Institute in Alcoy. I applied for a European Union project, a co-creation project called Reframe. It was from the Horizon 2020. and I was one of the 20 artists that was selected for a funding program. And I think this was the most beautiful experience for me in the 10 years that I've been working, because it allowed me to have the conversation and to finally make my own yarns and to incorporate that in my textile design. And when I entered ITEX in the Tech Hub from Spain, I was connected with a chemist, and he had like a team of technicians, and this is my team. And he told me, if you want to work here, you need to go with my technician every day, and you need to make a report of them. So I was shocked. They opened the doors for me, so I bring my camera with me and my recorder, and I interview each and single one of them for 1 week. And then after, he told me, if you know what they do, then you can create your own yarn. So I explained that I was working with soluble yarns before, and then we used soluble liquid, and we used architectural materials to create the adaptive archifilament. So the adaptive archifilament is a filament that was brought to life because in Textile Lab in Tilburg, a lot of textile designers are searching for 3D forms with no waste in textile. And I was dreaming about also a yarn, because you can make 3D shapes with the blueprint of the textile itself and using non-transformable yarns, but you can also go parallel. But these yarns are still not on the market. So this was an experiment, and we went first on 3D modeling, so working on simulation. I was also connected to Tech Hub in Austria, in Linz, and I had the amazing team there as well. We started writing and drawing wildly on the board what the actual archifilament is and what I want to do with it. So I explained that in Spain I was working on technology with multifilament and with yarn making. And then they told me, maybe it's interesting that you work here on a monofilament, because it's a very different technology. It's about extrusion. And I had the privilege to have the same concept working in my project in 2 different countries. So the outcome would be like a total surprise from both languages that I was touching. What you see here is a monofilament extruder machine, and they actually rebuilt the machine to create the archifilament. So in this case, the archifilament turned into an embossing step model that creates a crystallized texture. And in this technology, the filament did not transform, but I was really interested in the potential of maybe bringing a monofilament to the market that has like a wet look or a crystallized look. So it's always about staying open and the benefit of the surprise and seeing new elements and new options in that. In Project Reframe, I also got in contact with suppliers. And this is a seaweed silk that I was able to find in Switzerland via EMPA, this federal Swedish material laboratories. And I brought them to my contacts, Tjeerd Verhoeven and Caroline Slotje in Groningen in the Netherlands. And they were working on seaweed technology with dyeing techniques. And they dyed all the bobbins that I got. And I got a big box, and they worked on it for 3 months. And they had a lot of trouble putting the bobbins back on the original cones, the bobbins that they were sent on. So they freestyled, and they made like a new machine to spin all the yarn, the dyed yarn, the green dyed yarn back on the cones. And we brought them back to Textile Lab to create the textiles for Project Marinero. And it was a more year project, I would say. I have worked for that specific project in Textile Lab for 2 years, as you can see here. This is my technician, Judith Peskens. And she really went back and forth with the tech hubs that I was working with in Europe. because we were testing the yarns. They need to be tested on the machine. If they are good, yes or no, and then a report needed to be made and sent back to the institute, for example, in Spain and in Austria. So it was like a dance, I would say, until it was right, because sometimes yarn is not, it's great to look at, and then it doesn't function on the machine. So you need to redo everything until it is perfect. This is a detailed picture from the actual archifilament and the seaweed yarns, and also the crystallized filament, right next to each other in a gradient. And the green ones are, of course, the seaweed yarns. The one that is white with gray is the actual archifilament. And the picture after this one, it was one of the samples that we created. So it's all about the first drawing that I made, with the scratch drawing that I had the idea in my mind to really use all the material that was woven. And we really searched for the balance on the edges. I also wanted to use the floats around the edges inside the dresses, because they were stitched in the end. These are mannequins that I bought during the project because I had the idea that I wanted to go all biomimicry to create a synergy with the nature. And of course, I worked a lot with rain before and water. So I wanted to create a synergy with the elements around me, and to make like almost a poetic statement where I was able to create a dress in the nature without me even touching it. So just reporting it, filming it, photographing it. And I was able to connect with the artist that worked a lot with metal in my city town. He has a workplace. I was really lucky to meet him, and he was able to make the installations for me. I think he made like around 6 installations, because eventually we made 66 patterns, woven patterns. And the image that you see right now is the actual archifilament that is sprayed in ITEX, one of the first samples. And here you can see what it does when it transforms with rain. So afterwards, the simulation that you see here is a 3D model, how you can see that the weaving pattern is incorporated into the Jacquard weaving machine. And afterwards, I cut it. And I used the mannequin from the installation, and we drape it around it. And the middle part are just floats. So they are not woven, they are the monofilament warp. And the two seams on the side, they were closed. And yeah, this simulation was made before, so that I can do the pitch for the European Commission in order to get the money, to invest my team of the technicians and everybody around them. And I made the first sample also for the pitch. So this is the first experiment that we did. So you see, it's the soluble yarn that I used. It's not the archifilament yet. So you saw that the material was bursting open, but you can see that something is happening, right? So the challenge here was to create a shape with the archifilament without the dress bursting or becoming soluble after all. We used the soluble liquid instead of a soluble yarn. And the soluble liquid was holding the architecture, the force of the filament. And design 33 from all 66 prototypes that we experimented on my roof of my studio in Arnhem was the best outcome. I'm really happy with this image. On the left, you see the before effect. On the right, you see the after effect. And this is only with the yarn that we made with ITEX. So there is no mixed materials, only adaptive archifilament in the weft and the warp with the monofilament. So right, I found what I was dreaming about. And after, you need to bring it to the market. So then again, I had the question mark. Okay, now I can make my commercial collection that I started in 2012. Now I can make it like in form. because this is really what I want to sell, and this is everything that I stand for as a designer. And now I'm working in a project that is actually called Search for Fashion. It is also a COSME project from the European Commission. Up, you can see some samples that we made from a top and a skirt that I created for my debut in Paris. So I went to the people and I said, okay, this is a design that I made in 2017. I don't care that it's not made now. It should be timeless. It should be non-seasonal. I can imagine people wearing this. I want to bring it to the showroom. I want to sell it. I want to be in the mid segment and see if it works. Like try to do it. And then at the same time, I also worked with 3D printers to create a signature shoe. And the shoe was inspired by the sailboats from my grandfather. During his retirement, he made a lot of hobby sailboats, and the shapes of the elements were put into the shoe. So this is also interesting. And I have a very wild creative mind. And at the same time, I still had the idea of making an art project. So I was doing the commercial project finally. And then I went to one of my colleagues in my studio and I said, oh, you know how to draw well, right? And then he said, yes. And then I said, I need to do a pitch for the European Commission. And I want to do what I did with the rain, but in the sea. And he said, what? You want to do it in the sea? You are going to drown. And I said, no, I'm going to do it with a team, and we will do it with wetsuits. And I have this crazy idea. Let's do it. And I applied for it, and I got the funding, and we did it. I went to Textile Lab. The low picture, you can see the before effect, and on the right picture, you can see the after effect of the transformation of the yarns. So it was quite successful because Judith and we already knew how we needed to incorporate the technology from Project Reframe into the blueprint. So I phoned my friend who is a photographer and I said, hey, let's go to a camping on the coast with the North Sea. We will do like a funny weekend and we make like an art project. And we went there together and he said like, maybe it's going to rain. And then I said, no, just try. And if it fails, it fails and it will be okay. And yeah, I had the idea to make it in very fresh, bubbly colors, like a candy factory, because it's really contrasting with the nature around it, so that it really pops. Because the photographer had the idea to work with drones, so that means that the drone is very far away from the installation in the sea. So it needs to be like fluo colors, right? And then he started to work with a drone, as you can see here. And the installation was put in the sea, and the waves were hitting the installation, and it was quite frightening because I did it with one assistant and myself, and I injured myself during this. I could almost not walk anymore, but we continued, and we brought the installation more deep into the sea, and eventually the salt started oxidizing the material, and we also dipped it under the water to create all the synergies with the shape, right? So that all the elements of the archifilaments can do their work. And it was laying in the salty water for, I would say, a few hours. Yeah, and afterwards we collected all the data, we made like the video, and the photographer was happy, everybody was happy that it succeeded. We had the sun, and we played around, and in the end, yeah, it was a beautiful photograph. I think he made like 1,000 photographs, and this was my favorite one. He was also very happy about that. And maybe I will do this more in the future, these kind of new ideas. I have, the images of the seaweed, farms underwater where they are growing like seaweed in lines. Maybe this would be the idea to make like a dress in this way in the future, so that it can grow underwater. But this is a question that I'm going to put with my contacts in the future, and we will see what happens next. So here again, I brought it on the roof just to show. On the left, it's undeformed, and on the right, as you can see in the waste, it starts to wave and it starts to float and make shapes again. Yeah, this was a nice new experiment. I was also zooming in because I was seeing like the raindrops on the filaments, and I thought about the crystallized yarn that I made before during Project Reframe. And I made a picture and I run to ITEX and I said, I want this. And then they said, no, you need to apply for a new research and development project. And they said, okay, do you want to continue to do the crystallized yarn? Do you want to industrialize it? And I said, yes. Do you have new materials? And they told me, yeah, we are working now with new polymers from polylactic acid. They are from the waste from the food industry, starch from corn, from beets, sugar from beets. And they worked with a monofilament extruder. They adapted the machine, so they needed to make new nozzles, and we prototyped them. And again, I sent the prototypes to the weavers, to the knitters. And also this is an image to investigate, to research if this is really like the effect. And then when I was in the Frankfurt Tech Textilmesse this year, somebody told me, yeah, maybe you can make this and make it illuminated. Maybe I can connect you with a new contact because it looks like it gives light. It's raindrop. It's basically a raindrop effect. It's a raindrop monofilament, as I would call, and it's biodegradable. So yeah, this is the most interesting, unique characteristic. And for me, it's also cool to see this potential yarn used by architects, but by other talents that work in the textile lab, by future fashion designers that want to create their own textiles, and to also contribute to the library, the yarn library of the textile lab, for example, so that they have new, more expressive and more unique materials that they can work with in the future, other than that they have just cotton or just maybe a soluble yarn, but also maybe some yarns or filaments that have like an interesting effect. So I'm working at 7 projects currently. This is my favorite project that I've ever done. It's called the Adaptive Archifilament Dress. And I worked before with Damien Semerjian. He is a Parisian technician that was connected with me via Textile Lab. And we are working now in the realm of knitwear. And this is something really refreshing and new for me, because we can create circular shapes with no waste. So I can step away from the square patterns and really push the boundaries and study how this can become a dress eventually. So I think this will be my first commercial line that I will show next year in Tranoï. I already did a preview. Actually, during the workshop that I'm going to do today, you will see all the material samples that we did until now. So it's still a work in progress. And what you see here are my designs that I sent to BIAF. These were the 3 designs that were selected as the best fashion design, the grand prize. And yeah, I was really lucky to be part of this amazing platform, and I'm really thankful that that the jury select my project. And also, mostly important, that you can find new people that really warm your heart and that you feel like you become to a new family. So yeah, really, thanks a lot for this presentation, and yeah, let's go to the next 10 years, I would say.
Thank you so much, Jeff. That's been so interesting and fascinating to hear about your creative process, how you apply your imagination to create material innovation and apply it into fashion. I'm sure everybody has lots of questions, but we're going to wait till the end to open up the panel to Q&A. And now
get to know a new material, a new sustainable material actually, like kombucha and bioplastic. The challenge was all about how they can deal with these biomaterials and design a beautiful handbag within 5 days only. Believe it or not, they did it. Allow me not to make it longer and you and introduce our challenge winner, Manahel Al Qasim, so she can have a brief about her experience with the challenge and the winning piece.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Shahad and Maha, and hello, everyone. My name is Manahel Al Qasim. I'm a fashion and textile designer from Saudi Arabia, Riyadh. I'm very happy and honored to be here in the conference with all of you. So, while I'm talking about the project, we will have a video going on in the process. So please, if you have any questions, kindly write it down and we will have a Q&A at the end of the session. So first of all, I will talk about the concept of the challenge, which is, for me, it was very challenging because of two major things. One is the biomaterial, which is a new experience for me that I wanted to experience and make a useful, unique, outstanding piece of art. At the same time, we can tell a story behind the concept. And the second thing is the timing, because the challenge, it was 5 days only. So I will start talking about the concept and the story that I wanted to tell the world. I was like, well, my motto was always to create the things that I wish existed, and to mix that with the strength in representing, always representing my culture and my design, which was the architecture and the fashion. I wanted to mix these two major concepts in a very special edition handmade piece of art. It's called Perspective. So Perspective is a handmade that reflects the beauty of architecture from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. It highlights the specificity, simplicity, and the texture of the architectural Saudi Arabia mud building, windows, which says the patterns, it's called Luhuj. And the concept behind that, it was the pattern that that I made the bag with. It was inspired by the Luhuj, which is the window patterns of Saudi architectural buildings. And then the pattern, it was a zero waste material. And then this is the product that we came up with. And this project also supports the goal of the Saudi Vision 2030, which inspires others around the whole world to share building a sustainable tomorrow. So yeah, that's it for me today. And then I can show you guys here the product. Here you go. Okay, so you can see it here. And then the pattern here, it's very architectural. As we said, the concept is the Saudi buildings. And the pattern of this bag, it was zero waste material. And you can see the texture also, the kombucha texture, it's very unique and it's very outstanding as well. So you can see it's very unique in its own way. And then how we can let me open it for you guys. As you can see here, yeah. So yeah, this is for me. Thank you so much, everybody.